My charge to the construction team and to Kyle Harris, who's a project manager, myself, and to Brian Schneider is if a hunter who hunted this land 5 years ago comes, I want him to recognize this land once the golf course is there. I don't want it to just be totally freewayed and then replanted what people think golf course grass should be.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Whole Story Podcast. Robbie here. Today, I had a great conversation with Jeff Warne. That name has to be familiar. He's an incredible teacher. He's been at the Bridge as the director of golf. He's done so many things in the golf world. And now he's building a new course in what's got to be the hotbed of the country, maybe the world, the Aiken, South Carolina area in New Holland Golf Club. So had a great chat with him. Many thanks to Nick Schreiber for the introduction, but we played with his buddy Mark down at Augusta Country Club. So many people that have said Jeff needs to be on the podcast. And I got to make a strong recommendation that you go listen to Jeff when he joined Tom Coyne on the Golfers Journal podcast, because great conversation. Tom's obviously the best interviewer out there, just asked incredible questions. He and Jeff had a great conversation, but you can learn a ton more. I didn't dig into all the same things with Jeff because Tom did such a good job of getting some of that. So we had fun. We talked about Jeff's background and then what he's doing at New Holland, because that's, again, another great golf destination that you're going to want to, one, pay attention to now, but two, put it on the list to come play at some point. I love how he wants to keep things as natural as possible, make it, I think many have described it as old school. It's going to be great. Brian Schneider's working with him. He's got Kyle Harris as the project manager, like just built a great team. Obviously, he knows a ton of people in the game. So really excited about New Holland Golf Club. Y'all are going to like this episode. As always, many thanks to our friends at Summit Golf Brands, the Bedrati Zero Restriction Fairway and Green. If you go to any of their sites and use BestBall20, they will save you 20% on your order. They've got a lot of stuff. We're in the springtime now. They've got a lot of spring lineups out there. It's going to be getting hotter wherever you are, maybe, unless you're, I guess, in the southern hemisphere. Then it's going to be getting colder, so you can buy the cold weather stuff. But check out what all these brands have. Use BestBall20, save a little money on that. So let's jump to this episode. Jonathan had a little technical difficulty while we were recording, so he's there at the beginning. He's not there at the end, but I know he will be listening to this episode. So Jonathan, sorry you were missed. It was a good episode. We're going to go see New Holland and go hang out with Jeff in person sometime, because like we mentioned, he is pretty much right in between where both of us live. So y'all enjoy this episode with Jeff Warne on the Whole Story Podcast. All right, well, joining us on the Whole Story today, Mr. Jeff Warne. Jeff, how's it going today?
It's going great. Great day to me in South Carolina, a little cooler, and it's kind of nice.
Yeah. So are you in the Aiken area right now?
I am in New Holland at my home, which is 500 yards from the tree farm, maybe half a mile probably from New Holland Golf Club.
Very nice. Well, you are then pretty much exactly right between Jonathan and I. Jonathan, like we were just talking, in Augusta. I'm in Columbia, so we can just come meet up at your house for some coffee later.
I'm exactly in the middle of the two.
That's
right.
A good spot. Well, Jeff, you're doing something awesome there, and we'll get to that, but we like to kind of go down the history of our guest, because, for us, golf is people. And even though you're doing some incredible things at New Holland, like it's really about the people and the relationships and connections. So talk to us about your golf journey. We were just talking a second ago. You found out you had a membership when you were 11 in golf, and maybe that's when it took off for you.
I grew up, I think the first thing I did was swim, and then somehow I came to baseball, and I was a baseball nut, and just had every stat memorized and all the baseball cards. And whatever I did, I went into full bore, which obviously lends itself to golf. It's hard to find people that will play baseball with you all day long. So I would go through 3 or 4 different sets of friends because I wanted to play. We were idiots. We didn't know any better. We'd pitch 9, 10 hours straight and didn't know anything about ruining our arms. But I went with my catcher one day, who was my next door neighbor, and we went to Augusta Country Club, and I played with him as my guest. And I pity the poor people that were behind us because uh, rumor has it, as a child, I was pretty much a stickler for rules and regulations. So I'm sure we hit counted every shot and beat every ball hole to the bitter conclusion. I still remember I shot 152. First time I'd ever touched a golf club, no range session, just right. My guess is that didn't count whiffs because I would think there would have to be a few on your first effort. But I got home, told my dad the story, about what I did today, and he's like, "Well, we're members there. You can go there anytime you want." And that was the greatest thing you could, especially for golf, and for me, sort of an addictive personality. I liked it because when I was pitching, I could be hitting my spots and hitting the corner of the plate, and they'd hit a ground ball and it'd go between the first baseman's leg or something like that would happen. I wasn't a great teammate. I'm throwing my glove at the ground, and in golf, if it goes between your legs, that's on you. So no one to blame, no total accountability, and in my mind, it was whoever worked the hardest. We now know that's not necessarily true. Talent has a lot to do with it, and background and history and golf lessons, and of course I was too stubborn to take any golf lessons. I was just going to go out and beat the game into submission by hitting more balls than anyone else, having the best short game. And so it was a perfect game for, I continued to play other sports. I played basketball and football in high school, but those were just go to practice. I wasn't playing any pickup basketball games or any flag football. It was just go to practice, and that was it, playing the games. But otherwise, it was golf all 24/7.
Augusta Country Club isn't a bad place to cut your teeth, though.
No, it was really good then because we weren't in a golf boom. So now you
Right.
can't show up at a golf course at 7 and go tee off because there's 73 people on the maintenance crew who have to make sure every blade of grass has been touched and adjusted just the right way. So you have to inevitably wait for the golf course to open. And when I was a kid, I would be coming down 18 just as my friends were arriving, which was perfect. So it's 9:30. I'm ready to go play that second 18. I'm warmed up now. Now we're going to go play again, and then I'm going to catch another set of friends to play the third 18. So things were different then, and everyone talks about the golf. I'm in the golf business, and everyone talks about how great it is for the game. I'm not sure it's great for the game. It's great for business owners. It's great for manufacturers, but for golfers, I don't think the golf boom's necessarily great. Tee times go up, courses are more crowded, so it's a mixed bag.
Well, you talk about Augusta Country Club. Jonathan and I just had our first experience there, what, a month ago, maybe? And I believe we played with one of your friends, Mark Pritchard.
Yeah. Yep. Yes, he is. Mark, America's guest.
Yeah, he was an incredible host. Another mutual friend of ours had connected with him, and then Jonathan and I got the extra invite, and so it was a joy to be out there with him. And I can now say I've hit a couple balls into Rays Creek. You
There
don't
you
have to
go.
really tell 'em what part of Rays Creek it was, but
Yeah,
yeah, it
that
was.
that hole, the green used to be on this side of Rays Creek, and you couldn't see Rays Creek because there was so much underbrush and woods back there. It was about a 480 par five, and then they moved it across. I don't really feel like that hole has ever worked since they moved it across the other side of the creek. It just sort of a automatic layup for good players and a nightmare for less than good players. So I'm not necessarily, even though obviously they brought Rays Creek into play, I'm not necessarily a fan of that. I think it could have just been a long par four.
Yeah. Well, it was a great day either way. So back to you though. When did you take your love for golf and like know that's what you wanted to do for a career right away?
No, because you couldn't really survive in the golf business in the 1980s. I remember friends who worked in the golf business making, 450 an hour, and people didn't take lessons. There wasn't a lot of money in golf lessons then. If you were a head professional, I think you could eke out a pretty good living, but it never occurred to me that I would work in golf. I always was sure I was going to be a player. I was a good junior player, and it never occurred to me I wouldn't be a player. And then I got out and turned out I wasn't a player. You start playing with guys that are better than you and recognizing that they're hitting it 30 yards farther, and they wedge it better and they putt it better. And I kind of came back to the golf career when I graduated in 1985, and I took 2 years where I bartended and barbacked in the old Adams in the old Holiday Inn in Augusta. And so I'd work 7 days on and seven off. And I would take those 7 days and go somewhere, either play in an event or work with a teacher. I got to see a lot of great teachers, which helped my teaching. I'm not sure it helped my golf. After 2 years of doing that, recognizing that it's hard to get better when you're working 84 hours straight for 1 week, and then you've got the entire next week off because it took you about 2 days to recover from that 84. I would get there at 5 and leave at 5, PM and AM. And the next day, a lot of times I'd be going to the patch and getting in a money game. So I'd go grab 3 hours sleep, show up there at noon, play with the guys that had been in the locker room gambling, playing all night. And I'd at least had my 3 hours of sleep and play with them. And that was fun. And it did a lot for my competitive juices and helped me a lot in many, many ways. But it became clear to me that playing wasn't going to be the path. So I was working actually at Jones Creek in the restaurant for a guy who had previously been at the Holiday Inn. He'd been my manager when I was a bar back there. And he got me a job working in his restaurant, which unfortunately turned into managing the restaurant, which I absolutely didn't want to do. And Brooks Simmons owned the original Jones Creek, and he had previously been the director of golf at Palmetto Dunes. And he said, "We got to get you out of here. We got to get you in the golf business." So he got me the job at Palmetto Dunes. I would have been February of 88. And that was the greatest thing that ever happened. You go there and you go to work at 5, you move carts around till 1 o'clock and take care of the people. And then you get to go play a great golf course every single afternoon. And those are the most fun times of my life because we played golf every day. Those of us who wanted to play a lot of golf would always trade our way into opening shifts so that, come 1 o'clock, grab a few beers and get in the cart and go out and tee it up. So those were great times. From there, I actually ran into Bob Patton, who's from Augusta. I don't know if you know Bob, but he's a head professional at Long Cove. Shockingly, in a bar, he looks at me and he goes, "You know anybody that needs a job?" And I go, "I could use a job," even though I had a job. He goes, I could use a job. What do you got?" So I went over to work for him there. And I had been taking a lot of golf lessons and traveling around and taking my money I'd earn on these 7 days straight and seeing great teachers, but it was all selfish. It was all to become a player. It was not to learn how to teach. But lo and behold, I had learned a lot with myself as the guinea pig and getting to watch them teach other good players. Spent a lot of time with Jimmy Ballard, got to see him teach a lot of tour players. And then when I was at Long Cove, I had a hockey player who was a goalie for Pittsburgh, Michel Dion, not Marcel Dion, but Michel Dion, who was a kind of a wannabe, retired hockey player, wannabe golf pro. And he was taking lessons with David Ledbetter. And he had one, you couldn't get in with David Ledbetter at the time because Nick Faldo had burst onto the scene and had won, the Open 18 straight pars, and everybody was talking about Ledbetter and Faldo. And I filled in for him on a golf lesson, and that got me kind of in the rota with Ledbetter, and we had a great relationship. At the time, he was working with Mitchell Spearman, and I think about now what I charge for a golf lesson and and it pales in comparison to what others are charging now. And for $125, I would have 4 hours with Mitchell Spearman and David Ledbetter, and there would be 4 of us in the clinic. And typically, 2 of them would be tour players. Larry Mize was in one of my sessions. Scott Simpson was in one of my. This is a year or two removed from Larry Mize winning the Masters, and Scott Simpson winning the U.S. Open. So these are some pretty major players. And it was always good players, made a lot of great contacts, and a lot of club pros were in these sessions. And at the time I was working at Long Cove, and I would always arrange it where I would have Sunday off from one week and then Monday off for the next week. So I'd get back-to-back days so I could do these sessions, and didn't mind driving it, 7, 8 hours to Florida and driving back the next day. But it reinforced my belief that I needed to teach up north because that's where the real teaching was going on. That's where the top teachers were. They were either in South Florida or New York, and I met an awful lot of club pros, and I'm finding out what they're making, and I'm like, wow. And I'm teaching a lot at Long Cove. I still remember going into Bob Patton's office when he interviewed me, and I said, "Well, Bob, ultimately I want to do a little teaching." He goes, and I was on the path to be a PGA member, but I was not a PGA member yet. I was an apprentice, and he says, "Well, you could teach all you want here." He goes, "Look, I do the most teaching of anybody, and last year I did $3,000 in teaching. This would have been 1988, and he was probably charging $20 a half hour." When I left there 3 years later, I did 51,000 in golf lessons at $25 a half hour. That's a lot of hours of teaching to do that. And I was so busy teaching, I didn't have time for Bob. And I went in his office like 3 years and I said, "Bob, I don't have any time to give you your 40, 50 hours you need in the golf shop because of my teaching." And he said, "No, absolutely. You need to go somewhere bigger where you could teach more and make that your career," because I had too many dual responsibilities, which I was failing at miserably. I was probably the worst assistant pro that's ever been in the history of golf as far as helping out in the golf shop and answering the phone because all I want to do is teach and play. And when I hire people, that's what I look for, people that want to teach and play, because I can find somebody that can answer the phone. I can teach them how to answer the phone, but they better have a passion for teaching and playing. I don't want to hear you're an Excel expert or you can do a great scoreboard or all of the things that the PGA attempts to teach people to do. Because when you attempt to teach people to do that, become a great merchandiser, we need all of that. But if that's your goal, you're replaceable. I can go down to Kmart and get a really good merchandiser. I can go in an art store or an art school. I can get a really good calligraphy guy or gal. So if you're a golf pro and you're going to work for me, you better want to play golf. And at 4 o'clock, when you've been there since 6 in the morning, we just had the member guest. If I grab you and say, "Let's go play a quick nine," your answer better be yes. If it's no, I'm tired, or I got to go see my girlfriend, I got to go to the beach, you're not going to last very long with me. So
You're looking for you.
what's that?
You're looking for you. Like you want people just like
Well,
you
I
were.
want people that love golf. If you don't love
Exactly.
golf, you should not be in the golf business. Although it has become lucrative, it certainly wasn't. So I don't think you're going to be successful at golf if you're worried about going to the beach at 4 o'clock or whatever your girlfriend needs to, some of your time or this, that, and the other. I think it has to be golf, golf, golf first, and then I hate to say this, and then your job next. And and family's difficult, and we're in a new era where I completely get that. I was very fortunate that I have 3 kids and my job is feast or famine in the Hamptons, and that July and August are crazy town, but April, May aren't that busy. So whatever I need to get done, I can get done by 3 o'clock. I coached Little League for 15 years. I coached youth hoop for 15 years, was on the Little League board. So I'm not saying people shouldn't have their family, but I'm saying find a way to get that golf in. You want to spend time with your family, then get up at 5 and go hit golf balls while they're sleeping, because you need to be passionate about golf, in my opinion, to be successful in this business.
So, is that what took you up to the bridge? Was that your first spot?
No, so back to our conversation with Bob Patton in Long Cove. I had a teacher, a student there, David Everett, who's a very good player, played for Georgia in the 70s. And I had been working quite a bit with a lot of good players on Hilton Head, Kevin King, and they were sending me a lot of good students that could really play. This would have been 90, 91. And David comes to me and says, I'd already gotten this idea in my head. I needed to go up north and teach there at some of these. Didn't know much about golf in New York, but knew that the good jobs were up there. And David said, "You need to go work for Jim McLean." And I had loosely knew who Jim was, and I had read more of his articles than I realized. I just didn't. Sometimes you read an article, you don't pin who it is and what it was. And so I met Jim at the 1991 Ryder Cup, War by the Shore at Kiowa, and we agreed that I was going to come work for him at Sleepy Hollow that following summer, which was great. And then we were hosting the 1991 Mid-Am, the U.S. Mid-Am at Long Cove in 91. And I get a call from Jimmy. He's like, "I just got the concession from Jimmy Ballard at Doral, and I'm going to be taking over Doral, and I need teachers right now. Can you come now?" So I walked into Bob and told him the situation, and gave him my 2 weeks notice, and that was it. And went down to Doral. So started with him, and that's probably the greatest concentration of teachers in the country year in, year out. So much training, so many good players. I had reasonably good success in the early 90s in the Met section, winning assistance events, finishing third in the Met PGA. I was probably the worst player on his staff. I mean, he always had guys that could flat out play. Daryl Kestner, Rick Hartman, legends. Rick, who I later went to work with at Atlantic. But it was such a great place to be. So many people who went on to be top 100 teachers, and such a great think tank of having us. And we did everything. There were probably eight of us, setting up the tees for the golf school and having meetings. And at the time, my wife was a school teacher, so she had stayed behind in Hilton Head. And so I had, say, 6-8 months of, nothing to do at night. So I'd be in there. We had a net indoors, and I'd be in there with some of the teachers that were in the same boat as me. And just, it was 14 hours a day of total immersion in, something I was super passionate about. And, I don't know how many top 100 teachers he's had go through there, but he's had probably 300 people that are directors of instruction or head professionals or top hundreds. And, he continues now at the Biltmore and still has an incredible staff. And Jim and I, we were partnered in a radio show beginning in 2012, I want to say, somewhere around 2013. Jim, he was just my guest last Saturday. He occasionally comes on as well now. It was my show. I really didn't want to do it. I was trying to get him to do it because he had a golf school to promote. I didn't have a golf school to promote, nor was I interested in promoting it, but somehow it ended up in my lap. And it's been great fun, though. I'm sure you guys enjoy what you do. And it's been
Oh, yeah.
meeting the people, having a guest, and having to do so much homework about the guest was like a resurrection of my career. You get a little complacent later in your career, and all the people that I have on and reading their stories and their backgrounds. And it's really been a lot of fun. Now I have a partner, David Armitage, who does it with me Saturdays and Sundays. And David is a top 100 teacher and runs 2 clubs in South Florida, super dedicated, super passionate guy. And it's just been a lot of fun doing that podcast.
Yeah, you just another thing that you have on your plate that you're doing, right? Was Brian Lebetovich there with you with
Yes, he
Jim
was.
McLean? So we
Brian was
interviewed
an
him.
assistant in the early days,
Yeah.
and then he went on, became a teacher, and then he's at PGA West for years.
Yeah, we had him on as a guest, what, a couple months ago, Jonathan, I
Yeah,
think, and
great
Mhm.
yeah, just to
teacher.
talk about what they're doing at the Performance Lab out there at PGA West. So, yeah, maybe we're just going down the Jim McLean trail of all the old instructors, I guess.
Yeah, Jim tried to get me to run the operation in PGA West, but I didn't have any interest in leaving the Met section. The Doral was only a 4-month gig for me, and being in the Met section, because I went on I was at Sleepy Hollow with Jim for 3 years, and then went to Atlantic, where I was there with Rick Hartman, who sadly just passed away. But Rick was, one of the all-time great pros as far as playing golf, people person. Just, you couldn't have had a better mentor or better friend. My 6 years with him Atlantic, and our ongoing relationship when I set up the bridge, he was always there to help when I had a question. And anyway, the just being around people like that has been the highlight, of my career.
Sure. Well, you did mention your radio show, podcast and stuff, and I do want to ask that, like, how is it when you're trying to teach golfers, but you're using a medium like podcast, audio, video, stuff like that, when you're not hands-on in the dirt, like here's how you actually make the swing or what you should be doing. Like, have you found it difficult, or are you able to talk freely about like bigger concepts, things like that?
It's the worst possible way to teach golf is
Is it like
verbally.
you watching YouTube golf, like trying to get better?
No, I think YouTube golf is at least visual. I think there's some good stuff on YouTube, but on the radio, verbally talking to someone, that verbal is a form of communication. There's kinesthetic, hands on, the feel. There's visual. Visual's probably the best. Kinesthetic's probably the second best. But your words, they're useful because we need to talk, we need to communicate, but it's not ideal. I mean, we have fun on the show. I'd like to say it's all instruction. It's supposed to be, but it's generally not. We're talking about other things and having fun, and, what are our guests up to, and the PGA Tour. And David and I are on quite a roll for picking PGA Tour winners. I think we've picked 5 out of the last 6 winners. So
Okay.
We should have a gambling show.
Yeah. Who's going to win the Masters then?
This-
Everybody wants to
I
know.
picked Chris Goddard to win the Masters 2 months ago. So
Okay.
and I picked Cam Young to win the TPC a month ago. So
Wow.
we're on a roll. But to be fair, and this is the first time I picked Cam Young this year, you also got to remember that I picked him for every event for 3 years. So eventually, but in this case,
Eventually,
I
you
picked
knew
him.
what you knew it. He didn't live up to your high expectations for him.
He's so good that
Yeah.
I feel like when he starts winning, nothing really phases him. I know his dad well. He was the pro at Sleepy Hollow. I think 2 pros after we left, and in fact, one of the few first guys I met in the Met section. But his dad's, David Young's a super nice guy, great professional, obviously a great teacher.
Are you still doing stuff at the bridge? I know New Holland's
Yes,
taken over a lot,
yeah,
but so you
I'm
still
still a director of golf, so I'll go up there. I mean, daily I'm doing something. I have Addison Craig, my head professional, who's there in the off season running it and getting us organized for the season. Several other people are there now that, assistants. So I'll come in April 15th. We don't open until the 17th. So this year is going to be a difficult year, a lot of commuting back and forth. I usually play in a lot of events. So I think this year the events are going to suffer. The Monday to Wednesday that I'm gone will be down here in Aiken rather than off wherever in the Long Island PGA or Long Island Open.
Yeah. Our friend Brandon Smith, who's a member at Old Barnwell and Columbia guy as well, he went with Nick Schreiber and them, that crew last year, and I think I got to play the bridge, and he was just raving
Yeah.
about it. So had a lot of great things to say about it.
Now I need to interrupt there. He didn't mention Goat Hill.
He might have, yeah.
So I set him up to play the bridge. I didn't play. My son, who's an old Barnwell member, he came out and played, and another bridge member there, Erwin Thompson, he came out and played. But I was like, you guys, there's 16 of you. I'll hook you up to play the bridge. And meanwhile, they're staying. The logistics of their trip were terrible. I'm not sure how they got what they got, but they were staying an hour and 45 minutes away in the middle of the island in some castle. And I didn't quite understand how that worked, but I was like, you got to play Goat Hill. So now which is a ferry ride from the bridge. So now they're getting farther away from where they're staying, 2 hours up. And Goat Hill's a 9-holer on Shelter Island that is one of my favorite places to play golf. Got 7 out of the 9 tee shots are blind, and just an old school 1901. They hauled the clubhouse up. They rolled it up on logs. They moved the building and they rolled it up on logs to the top of this hill, and no irrigation, very rustic conditioning, greens with some of the greens are inspiration for what's happening in New Holland Golf Club. I mean, there's 7-degree slopes on these greens because they were stimp it, maybe 4 or 5. So you can have slopes like that, but you could have a 10-footer at Goat Hill and play 12 feet of break. You got to put it up the hill and sideways, and it's coming in the back door. And you can have interesting, cool golf shots like that if you run the greens at 8 or maybe even 9, but you can't have that at 13 because it's totally unplayable, which is what we're doing to our game is we're dumbing it down. I don't want to use the word better because it's not an improvement, but the better we get at agronomy, the worse we're making the golf and the more expensive we're making it.
Yeah.
We just had that
I guess then
conversation.
that leads us to New Holland and what you're doing there. And I would highly recommend, we were talking with Tom Coyne even yesterday for something. And I know y'all had a great conversation on the Golfers Journal podcast to kind of give a little more of the story of maybe your history with the tree farm and even Old Barnwell and stuff. But another great golf course coming to the Aiken area in New Holland. So how are things going there? And tell us about it, because I've heard the term old school thrown out a number of times.
A lot of it's how we're building it. And, we would just grow up, most golf courses that get built now, they pick a center line and then they determine, okay, now in modern courses, the courses aren't getting much longer, but now there's a thing called strategy and width. So now there's 125-yard fairways, and don't get me started, but somebody has to pay for it when you have a 125-yard fairway. So they determine the center line, then they're going 60 yards to the right and they're going 60 yards to the left, and they're just taking a bulldozer and an excavator and moving all the roots and all the stumps and a skid steer and 97 other machines and taking this, what Mother Nature created, and basically nuking it. And then, okay, now we're going to build a fairway, and now we're going to build native with fescue in a can, as my owner, they seed out back the fescue, and they take all the native that was on the site and just destroy it, and they replant what looks like a golf course grass, whether it's wire grass. And I don't think anyone's ever seen wire grass in nature besides on a golf course, right? You ever seen it? I never seen it on the highway, but it's out there at Pinehurst everywhere. So to me, when you have a great natural site, you work with it. And our fairways, fortunately, the previous owner had built meadows on 5 holes. So we're literally taking these meadows, which are red sorrel and blue stem and whatever else grows naturally, or that he may well have seeded. And we're just spraying that out for the fairway and not tilling it, just spraying it out, taking a root rake, gently getting those out of there and sprigging right into it, which is what they would have done 100 years ago when they took over a farm to build a golf course. So there's a lot of cost savings there, first of all, but there's also a lot of naturalness to the ground movement that doesn't get flattened by the bulldozers. So it's a little different for the construction companies, but we're using Green Tea Golf and they embrace it. I mean, it's really cool to see them just like, hey, we can do that. And Kyle and myself do a lot of the work on the meadow holes and things like that. He sprays them, and we're going to be root raking them as soon as they check out. But I would say your frustration the first time you played New Holland Golf Club, if we have some holes open next fall, whether it's 6 or 12 or 18, I don't know where we'll be. It depends on how the summer goes, would be that if you hit it 60 yards to the right of the center line, which means you missed a 120-yard target, you're going to lose your golf ball, because Kyle and I haven't gotten to that native area, which is actually a native area, which is full of briars and small pines and blue stem and all that. We haven't gotten there yet, but we're going to over time, as opposed to just annihilating all of everything there, grubbing it down to dirt and then replanting it. Where, you play a brand new golf course, most brand new golf courses these days with big budgets, if you hit it 70 yards off the line, the first year it's just sitting on dirt because the stuff hasn't grown yet. You can hit it and you're back in play. But that has a big toll on erosion, wildlife. There's a lot of negatives to that we as golfers, in my opinion, need to be a little more aware of, because for golf to continue to, I don't want to use the word grow because it's grown enough, to sustain itself, to continue to be the great game, we need to quit being, I get trees on a golf course, too many were planted in the 50s and the 60s. I completely get that. And we've all seen it, courses get over-treed. Trees need maintaining. They need pruning. A tree you planted in 1968 at 20 feet is now 100 feet, and its canopy's over the fairway. I understand that, trees. However, we've gone the opposite way in architecture. Now, it's kind of like, if you want to demonstrate how much you know in golf architecture circles now, you just say, cut down every tree, cut down every tree. And I'm not talking about the top minds in the game. I'm talking about the groupthink that creeps into, in the 50s and 60s, if you wanted to show how smart you were, you said, plant more trees, plant more trees, plant a memorial tree. So I'm not suggesting we over trees, but I did give Brian the model. I said, I want it to look like Sunningdale in England, which is probably a little over-treed by my end. It's funny since I've told him that, they're doing a renovation and they're cutting a lot of their trees. So, look, trees cause a problem for airflow. They cause a problem for shade. There are definitely reasons why you don't want too many trees on your golf course. But if your site has trees, when you finish the golf course, there should still be some trees. If your site has blue stem or red sorrel or anything native, your site should still have that. So my charge to the construction team and to Kyle Harris, who's a project manager, myself, and to Brian Schneider is, if a hunter who hunted this land 5 years ago comes, I want him to recognize this land once the golf course is there. I don't want it to just be totally freewayed and then replanted what people think golf course grass should be. And that may have its pitfall. People may play, I'm never going back there again. It's too, you hit it offline, you lose a ball, and you play links courses, you hit it offline, you're gonna lose a ball there too. And the wind's blowing 30 miles an hour. We don't have that wind to contend with. So I want nature to be a big part of this golf course, and I want the site to be a big part of this golf course.
I heard, I guess on maybe that podcast, you said you're okay with weeds, right? You don't want to go through and destroy everything.
Yeah, and the issue becomes when you start adding irrigation to the equation. Right now, there's no irrigation, so the weeds that we have are pretty cool. They're well adapted to the site. We start throwing irrigation in there, and all of a sudden, those broadleaf leaves, weeds, big green, they start popping up. That's an issue that will have to be controlled, whether it's mowed or sprayed or whatever it is Kyle chooses to do. But in general, many of the native areas, I'm generally the guy on the tractor on the bush hog kind of working these natives. And there's little pines in there. There's a little woody material, which isn't ideal. You don't want to hit your ball in this woody material. But the more you mow it, the more that woody material starts to check out and the grasses start to take over. And a lot of people achieve this via burning too. And I'm not suggesting we would never do any burning, but I don't want to do any en masse burning here at first because I'm very sensitive to erosion and I want the soil to maintain its structure. So after we get the golf course built, after we get the fairways grown in and the tees built and the things like that, we may go in and do some burning after that. So it'll be a work in progress. I'm trying not to get the whole thing unbuttoned at the same time. We're trying to do a hole, finish it, move to the next hole, and not having a lot of exposed dirt simultaneously.
Yeah, great strategy. And I guess I
It
heard
might
it
be
was
probably
originally.
a little, in some ways it's more expensive, in some ways it's not, because there's an economy of scale to doing it all, then coming back. But in other ways, there's a great expense to the environment to doing it all at once. So we're trying to walk the fine line. It's not easy. I'm sure other courses, everyone has to face this choice, and it's easy to say now, let's see where we are in 6 months.
Sure. Well, originally I heard it was going to be, or you were hoping it would be a 9-holer, and then you were talked into 18. But it's golf only, right? Like that's the model.
It's golf only.
Golf
Golf
only.
and
Very
hot
nice.
dogs.
Golf and hot dogs. I love it. Are you going to be behind the grill?
Well, they're not grilled. It'll
Okay.
be It'll be those little Bonomatic machines like Augusta Country Club. I hope you had a hot dog when you were at Augusta Country Club last week.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's the world's best hot dog, and I'm literally going to copy them. I might steal their machine, or buy it.
There you go.
It's going to be a knockoff of that. So yeah, they'll be at some point. We'll be grilling and the like. But if you leave New Holland and you're talking about the food, I've failed.
Yeah. Well, food is always something that get people back, and I know Jonathan, it seems like had a little technical issues here. Food is one of his favorite parts because sometimes the golf is not as good, and at least a good hot dog can make up for it. But talk about the I guess the membership model. I hear it's a UK model. What people are going to have public access? There are going to be ways that any and everybody can play it. So tell us how that's going to be structured.
Yeah, ultimately it's a private club. We have members, but every private club has capacity. And the sexy way to describe it is a UK model. But you go to Shinnecock, maybe not this year because they have a US Open. You go to Shinnecock in May, or you go to National Golf Links of America. These are both top 5 in the world golf courses, or any top UK course. 80% of the people playing that golf course aren't members and aren't with members because they're using their non-capacity time to allow people to enjoy their golf course, keeps the dues down for the other members. So it's not an unheard of strategy here. It seems to me, I have to be careful how I phrase this, but there's a very common misconception that private golf club in the US means that no one should play it besides members. And like the more exclusive you are, the better you are. The best clubs in the world that I've played, they're non-members out there playing all the time. And you want to share your golf club with other people. You don't want to do it at the inconvenience of your members. And I'll use, say, a Ballybunion as an example, a place that blew up when Watson visited in the 80s. And all of a sudden it's the tail wagging the dog where they're they're building a massive visitors clubhouse, and they got the visitors in one, and they got the I'm not trying to get to that level, and if we have a busy day, there might be 0 unaccompanied, so it's going to be totally space availability and not at the inconvenience of the members, but, I think you wanna share your golf course with other people for sure.
Yeah. What's the schedule again? I know you kind of hinted at it, but when might people be able to start getting
Well,
out there? And
we are so far ahead of schedule. This was supposed to be a '27 build, and the permits just everyone told me how long it would take for the permits, and I sent one email down to Joel Duke, and next thing I know, I had a permit, and I just wasn't expecting that. Everyone told me how difficult he was to deal with. He couldn't have been easier. Couldn't have been nicer. So I think the state handles that part of Northern Aiken County now, and that was another reason he got kicked out to the state. And I said, "Oh no, 6 weeks lost." But then another 4 weeks we had a permit. So mm, to answer your question, I would have thought we would be starting this late 26, early 27, and open in 28. But now it appears we're going to have some golf open this fall. I don't know that we're going to have the infrastructure to support that, whether it's a clubhouse or whether it's a temporary clubhouse, much less a road, but we'll have some golf holes open. Our maintenance barn, we're getting ready to build on that right now. The maintenance barn's a cool story. We're milling. Our superintendent only wanted a pole barn, and I said, "Well, it's going to be right there near the road. I kind of want it to look good." So we've got a builder, Ryan Sather, who's originally from Augusta. Now he's a builder in Atlanta, and he wants to move back to Augusta. So he's been great with me. He contacted me saying he saw my picture in my little document of the clubhouse, which doesn't exist. That was just sort of the model. And he said, "I really want to build your clubhouse." And I'm getting calls all the time, so I kind of dismissed him, but he just kept being persistent, persistent, persistent. And so he's building our clubhouse, which we're holding off on for the moment because we want to get the infrastructure, the golf course done, and the maintenance barn. But the maintenance barn, there's a truss factory in New Holland. Who knew? Who's doing the sort of bones of the barn, and then we took 85 trees off the site from the timber company. So I sold him my timber, then I bought it back from him, and then moved it 2 miles down the road to the sawmill, where for 80 cents a board foot there, and they're milling all the land. So that's all the timber. So it's pretty cool that that barn's being built with the trees that came right off the site.
that's awesome. And I know Brian Schneider, he's, becoming more and more well known, incredible work over at Old Barnwell and many other places. I'm sure pleased with how things are going with him, right?
Yeah, I think he's tired of me micromanaging, but Brian's used to having his way. Nick Schreiber lets him do his things, and Nick Nick's had some success early in life and comes from a family who'd had a lot of success, and they just sort of gave Brian carte blanche, and I'm not giving him carte blanche. I'm saying, here's how we're doing it, and I'm hugging a few trees, and I think Brian wants it to be very different than Old Barnwell. Brian's a very accomplished, well-traveled, diverse architect. People think, oh, Old Barnwell's his first project. He's built so many projects where he was the lead, for Tom Doak on some of the best golf courses in the world, and he's seen so much great golf all over the country. So my guess is it's going to look quite different than Old Barnwell, which is a very big scale type of project. There weren't trees on that site. I was with Brian and Nick before they built it. It was, 3-year-old pines that were about 12 feet high for probably 80% of the property. There's a few trees out when you get out to 9 and 13, that area, but mainly there weren't trees to save. And there wasn't a lot of understory to save because amongst those pines were so thick. There were no nice native grasses or anything. So a lot of it they had to do the way they had to do it. We're just blessed with a site where the previous owner had opened it up, and all the native grasses and all the ferns and all the red sorrel and all that sort of proliferates from the sunlight that it received. So it's just, I think, I don't think Brian wants to be pigeonholed as to building the same golf course everywhere he goes. But, people want to say that about Tom Doak, but Tom Doak's every course is different. I'm sure Brian's the same way.
Sure. Different land, different
Different.
things to deal with. Yeah. Yeah, it'll be outstanding, I'm sure. Well, this is exciting. We'll start to wrap up here, and I want to ask a couple questions we ask all of our guests, and this one's kind of back to you, but we love asking and hearing the story of your most memorable golf shot.
My most memorable golf shot. I know my most memorable golf shot. So it's way back when, but probably not my best golf shot ever, but
Doesn't have to be the best.
so I had won my senior year in high school. I had won the double A state championship at Aquinas. I had won the individual title, and Georgia State High School Golf Association had a tournament where they invited all the state champions and the runners up to Gainesville, Georgia, to play in a tournament. And the winner of that tournament, it was a 27-hole event. The winner of that event would, there's a lot of stories that happened at this particular event. I'm not going to share them all, but the winner of that would then represent Georgia in the All-American Prep Championship. So, I drive up by myself. These were different days then, 18 years old, and stay in a hotel and play the tournament. And I still remember I made 4 birdies around the row in the back 9 of the last 9, the 27, to shoot 34. I think I shot 75, 34. So I would have been 1 over for the event. And I was in a playoff, and I can't remember the guy's name. His name was Mitch, but from the local there who was at that club, who had been the state champion, I think in AAA. And so he had a lot of, he had his coach there, he had all his fans. So we go out in a playoff, and it's on the back 9, and there's 50 people following. It's me carrying my bag, him carrying his bag, and 49 people rooting for Mitch, 0 rooting for me. So, I snap hook it in the woods on the first hole, and he does it down the middle on the green. I make a 20-footer to stay alive in the part. So we get to the 12th hole, which is a dogleg. This kid was long back when none of us were long. He was long. He was 280, 290 long when I was hitting at 250. So it's a dogleg left, probably 330. He knows the golf hole. And at the time, I played a big slinger hook. So this should have been right in on my alley. And he hits this bomb just straight over the corner. He's 40 yards from the green. And I'm trying to hit a big slinger hook around the corner. And I hit it dead straight through the dog leg. So I'm standing with the ball 4 feet above my head on a bank, 190 out to a right pin where I've got to hit this thing over ganja land on the right, which is total out of bounds. If I hit it fat, it's just gone. So, and I had a pretty clean lie, but the thing was, baseball was eye level, and I'm hitting a forehand from 190. I hit this shot that started 100 yards right of the flag and turned in, and then it somehow ended up right of the hole, 10 feet right of the hole. And then he went down and chunked his 40-yard wedge, and I 2-putted and won the tournament. So I win the tournament, and there's all these people out there. There's all people in golf carts. They pick him up, and they drive in, and I still remember walking in the dark by myself and get back to the parking lot. Nobody's there. Everybody's gone. I'm like, it's, there's no like, congratulations.
Yeah. Congrats.
It was literally like we shook hands on the green, and then everybody left. And I still remember walking back, and it was getting dark. By the time I got in, it was dark, and getting in my car and driving back to Augusta. But, that's easy to do when you won.
Sure. That years and years of baseball experience came in handy right then.
Yeah, 100%. Yep.
Yep. All right. Well, last thing we do a quick 9. It's kind of a rapid fire, but you can expound on these as much as you want. What is the favorite course you've ever played?
Favorite course I ever played? Could be Arrowtown in New Zealand.
Okay. Have not heard of that one.
It's not that, Port Salin in Ireland, but I would say Arrowtown in New Zealand. I was with my son. It was a little bit of everything rolled into one. And the scenery there is spectacular. It's right outside Queenstown.
Nice. Okay. Well, we'll add that to the bucket list. What course is at the top of your bucket list? Maybe a finished New Holland.
Yeah, that's too easy.
Yeah.
Course at the top of my bucket list. There's a 9-holer up in, I've never been to I've been all over Scotland, but I haven't been to Askernish, which everyone's heard of. This is an 18-holer. There's a 9-holer, and I'm trying to think of the name of it. I'll think of it here in a minute, but it's a 9-holer, Isla Harris. That's on I've been wanting to get, I've known about it for 20 years, and it's been all over Scotland, but never could quite find the time to add that extra day each way to get there.
Yeah. Well, they need to put it on the calendar. All right. What's your favorite course that no one knows about?
Favorite course?
Yeah. Is there like a hidden gem that somebody needs to go check out?
I just named two.
I know.
Arrowtown. I mean, how hidden are we talking? I've gone some pretty hidden. You know, it's less hidden now because Brian Schneider's written quite a bit about it, and many of the people who follow Brian have been there. But Waverley in New Zealand is pretty amazing, and I'd say the best thing about Waverley is the journey and all the other courses that you get if you choose to. My son and I went through three. There's a common theme here. I went through three sets of friends in New Zealand. I went on a 2 years ago. I went on a 3 week trip where I went with a golf rider and two of my assistants for the first week, and then my son flew to Wellington, and we did a trip all on the North Island of New Zealand, and so we hit all the highlight courses, many of which I'd already played, the famous ones because one of the guys was a golf rider. He wanted to hit those. So the first week had some hidden gems, and it had the famous ones you've heard of, the Teraites and Tiaris and the ones like that. But the last week, my son and I decided we weren't going to make any reservations. We were just going to look at the map and drive to a golf course and go play it, and not even make Airbnb reservations till we finished our round. And that was the best trip I've ever been on. And so the courses, Waverley was a destination because I knew about it from Brian. The course, Waitara, Clyde Johnson had given me a guidebook. He's a friend of Brian's, another architect and the shaper in the. He's on his own, but he does a lot of work for Tom Doak and other architects. He had given me a guide sort of to all these obscure courses, so we just used his thing and drove around. And for instance, when we played Waverley, there was a guy on a mower, and we just teed off. There was an honor box, and we stuck our money in the box. We teed off, and about the eighth hole, he's riding towards us like, oh, now what'd we do? You know, they closed or just what did we do? And he gets off the mower and he walks up and introduces himself. He goes, you know, I'd like to open the bar for you. And we really weren't near the bar. And he's like, you know, just play this hole, jump over, skip this hole, then come over. I'll meet you in the bar. So we go in there and we sit down at the bar and have like 4 beers. And then we go finish our round and he gets back on his mower. And it was the funniest thing. It was like 2:00 in the afternoon, and we were the only people out there, and we were talking, and he said, you know, I'm really glad you're here. We appreciate it. He goes, but please don't tell your friends because I enjoy my 35 golfers a week. And so an awful lot of experiences like that in New Zealand where my son and I were on brilliant, sunny, 7-degree days at 1:00 in the afternoon. We were the only person there. And I would say 3 different times someone pulled up and opened the bar for us and, you know, sat, had a drink with us, then went back to what they were doing. And we went back to what we were doing. That's not a great business plan, but it's certainly, there's a little part of me like that would like to have New Holland be like that. But I'm afraid that won't work unless I win the lottery.
Well, I'm sure somebody would appreciate you jumping off the mower and
Yeah,
opening up the bar for them. So
exactly. We'll
that's
continue
awesome.
that tradition anyway.
For sure, for sure. Well, the best part of golf is the people that we meet, you know, whether they jump off a mower or not. But who would be, this might be a tough question, who would be in your dream foursome?
Let's see. That would be my father, who I won't say he didn't play golf, but he played it once a year when I would drag him. And the ironic thing was I was a good junior player. I never once played good with him. You know, that father-son energy
Sure.
for whatever reason. You always want to impress him and show him. And meanwhile, he didn't know the difference between a Skull 7-iron and a pure 7-iron. So I don't know why I was feeling all that pressure. So I would say my father, my son, who was a multi-sport athlete in high school, and now he's kind of come to golf. He loves golf now. So who's going to be my fourth? I got to think about that. Ben Crenshaw.
Okay. I love it.
Yeah, we could talk history and probably wouldn't hit any shots. We'd just probably be talking history and architecture.
Yeah. Well, I think you already hinted at this one. We asked the favorite snack at the turn, and you said it's the hot dog from
It's
Palmetto.
a hot dog. That's the country club.
Oh, that's the country club. Yeah, yeah. All right. What is there a logo for New Holland? Or I guess the question really is, what's your favorite golf course logo?
Goat Hill.
Okay.
Goat Hill's got a, goat at the top of a mountain with a golf flag at the top of the mountain.
Nice. Does New Holland have a logo yet?
We haven't gotten that far. We have a few ideas, but nothing's official.
Is that something you want to design yourself?
I wanted to have meaning to the property and the site. We have a few things that are on the site, but they're fleeting. Like red sorrel is spectacular. I have some pictures of that red sorrel that I took, but it's only around for like 3 weeks. So, if you play there in January, you're like, well, what's this red flower? So just not sure. The property owner did a lot of burning on the property and it got away from him, and the New Holland Fire Department had to come out in force and deal with his burning. And there's a lot of marks on these trees. If you burn a property, typically the mark should be up 5 to 8 feet, and he's got marks up about 40 feet in the air. So the pines will recover, but a lot of the oaks probably will continue to check out, which isn't a horrible thing. But we have a lot of spectacular ghost trees on the property, but I hesitate to pick a specific ghost tree knowing that it's not going to be here. So it's got to be a generic ghost tree, knowing that we have probably a steady supply of them from his fire adventure.
Very nice. All right. When you go in a pro shop, or I guess in the history of going in pro shops, what's been your favorite pro shop purchase?
Oh, favorite pro shop purchase. I collect mugs. So I've had an opportunity to travel a lot, and that's really all I like to get is a mug, because there's nothing better than, especially when I was in New York, you're sitting there and it's 20 degrees outside and you're having your cup of coffee and you're looking at your mug you got from this obscure 9-holer in Maine. So I can't necessarily say which mug is bad. I break them all the time, so I have to keep resupplying. But I'm not a big pro shop merch guy. But when I do go into a golf shop that has a mug from a cool place, I'm going to get one.
Nice. Well, like you said, when you're sipping that coffee, it brings back good memories.
Yep.
All right. What is one thing golfers should do?
Learn something about the history. I'm always amazed at a PGA Tour player who's, golf's a full-time game now with fitness and conditioning. But there's also a lot of rest component, a lot of downtime for these guys. And I'm not talking about somebody that's having a bar back at night to make ends meet, who's then trying to go practice and do 10 million other things and maybe holding down a job in order to pursue their passion. I'm talking about a full-time tour player who has a lot of time to read. Or it stuns me how few of them have any respect for golf history. Some of them do, tremendous. That's why I could sit there with Ben Crenshaw and talk to him for a month. But I see other players that are completely unaware of a player from only a generation ago, much less 2 generations or previous.
Yeah.
Yeah, it needs to be more than a job. If I were hiring it, if I was a talent agency and I was looking for a pro to rep, I wouldn't be looking for the biggest money machine. I'd be looking for a guy who had the ultimate respect for the game and respect for the history.
Love it. All right. Last question. Finish this sentence. The best part of golf is.
I cheated. I've seen your podcast on this one, so I had a chance to think about it, and that makes it harder.
That's fine.
I have to cheat and give you 2 answers. And I really experienced this as a kid, because I was so passionate about golf that I would run out of friends, so I'd have to go just pair up with groups. The people that you meet completely randomly, and the more muni the golf course, the better. And you'd meet some incredibly successful people on these munis that just chose that's just where they like to play golf. They were down to earth people. So the people that you randomly, and then the other place that I've met, had a great opportunity to meet the same. But every year I go on this Don Quixote quest to play in the Senior Open over in, Scotland or England or wherever it happens to be that year. The people on that same quest that I meet that are club pros in England or Scotland that I've been able to form, relationships with, you see them, and I'm now 63 years old. I last qualified to play for it when I was 59. So my days of playing the Senior Open might well be behind me, but that event is just the highlight of my year. The people, the memories, the people that I get to see. And there's 73, 74-year-old guys and hitting at 220 that are still playing in these, and getting to meet them and rekindle those friendships. So the people I would say. And then secondly, um, it would be the natural environments that you get to go into in golf. I'm a sucker for environment and scenery. So you hear these knocks on Pebble Beach, or you hear people, sophisticated architecture people, say that Torrey Pines is not a good golf course. And how you could walk around Torrey Pines and look around. In my case, I haven't played it. I've just driven around the perimeter getting as close. I've gone in the pro shop. I did buy a t-shirt there. Back to merch though. How you could play a course like that and be worried about architecture is, and I'm a big architecture guy, but the scenery to me is huge. Pebble Beach, how you could play Pebble and then say, well, if it wasn't on the ocean, it wouldn't be, but it is on the ocean. So, to me, the environment that you're in is the most important thing.
I love it. Well, you combine those two things, you get to hang out with people in a great environment. It's hard to beat it. That's why we love this game, right?
Hmm. That is
Yeah.
correct.
That is correct. Well, Jeff, this has been an honor to get to hang out with you. I appreciate Nick making the introduction, and so many others that have said, "Man, you need to have Jeff on." I was going to reach out a few months back, but then of course Tom beat me to it and had you on their podcast. So I was like, we'll give it a minute and let some things
Yes.
happen. So, but thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks to Nick for making the intro. Nick has been tremendous. I had the opportunity to, allegedly consult out there. They didn't need any consulting from me. I ended up emptying garbage cans and, I'm useless in the golf shop, so I wasn't any help there. But great staff out there. Nick's got a great operation out there, great culture. And it's so good that Nick asked me to stay on an extra month. And I said, Nick, you don't need to pay me. I said, I'd like my son to be a part of this. Let's get him a membership out of this. So that was a nice part of that we did, which is, my son's extremely proud of his membership at Old Barnwell. Such a great place, such a great culture.
I completely agree. It is amazing, and I thank you for again listening back to your chat with Tom, just the impact you've had at there, Tree Farm, and now New Holland, and so many other places. So, thanks for your impact on the game, especially selfishly for someone that's about 40 minutes away. So I'm excited to continue
Hey, you guys should
to
come by
continue.
and see the site.
Yeah, need to make it happen. We'll get that on the calendar for sure.
Okay. Well,
Well, yeah. For Jeff, this is Robbie, and you guys have been listening to another episode of the Whole Story Podcast.